JLMFC, doing leases with him,
Hi,
man.
Esteban.
Hey, how are you? Good.
Good morning.
How's it going?
Good.
Long time no see.
Yeah.
Hi. Still enjoying my. Not waiting in that line.
Okay, and we are broadcasting live, so whenever you like to start.
Okay. Good morning, everyone.
Oh, yes, please. Thank you.
Pull this up. Okay, here we go. All right. So 9:05. Let's go ahead and call it to order. Paul, if you would do the roll call, please.
Sure, I'm going to go. And Ted, could you make me a co-host so I can share my screen with the room? I'll go ahead and start the roll while we're doing that. I'll go in the order of the agenda. So once I call your name, if you can identify that you're here. Tony Royster.
Here. No.
Matt Rudnick.
Here.
Holly Walcott. Petty Santos sitting in for Holly Walcott.
Here.
Shauna Janeway sitting in for Janita Agualier.
Here.
Marlene Fonseca.
Here.
Esteban Lizardo.
Here.
And Lisa Palombi.
Here.
That is a quorum.
All right. Thank you so much. Do we have any public comments?
And if you'd like to make a public comment and you're on virtually, please press *9 on your phone so that you can be put into the queue. For those who are in the room, if you have a speaker card, please bring it to the front. Seeing none and hearing none.
Okay, thank you. So move on to the minutes. We have two sets of minutes from the September 7th, 2023 and November 2nd, 2023 meetings. Do we have any comments or questions or a motion to approve?
I would move to approve both.
Oh, thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. So if we can do the,
Okay, then we'll go in the same order of the agenda. So Tony, your vote.
Aye.
Tony votes aye. Matt, your vote.
Aye.
Matt votes aye. Hetty, your vote.
Aye.
Hetty votes aye. Shauna, your vote.
aye.
Shauna votes aye. Marlene, your vote.
Aye.
Marlene votes aye. Esteban, your vote.
Aye.
Esteban votes aye. And Lisa, your vote.
Aye.
Lisa votes aye. It's unanimous. The motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to Committee Report 2413, the IFEBP Annual Conference.
Good morning, JLMBC members. This is Roby Angelis, Management Analyst at the Employee Benefits Division. We present the report on the 70th Annual Employee Benefits Conference. This year, members may attend in person or virtually. The conference will be held at the San Diego Convention Center in San Diego, California, from Sunday, November 10th to Wednesday, November 15th. We recommend that the JLMBC approve the necessary funding from the Employee Benefits Trust Fund for any interested JLMBC members and staff to attend the November 2024 IFEBP conference either virtually or in person in San Diego. Information on travel expenses are listed in the body of the report. Attendees are encouraged to make travel arrangements by train or bus since the conference is taking place in an adjacent county. If you are interested in attending this year's conference, I will be sending out an email shortly, and I ask that you please respond by Thursday, March 28th to complete this. This concludes the report, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments?
Yeah, I'm assuming since this is an annual one that our folks have gone to before, for anyone who's been to it, I'd just be curious as to what they thought of the conference.
I'm very positive about it. I think it's really helpful.
Oh, good. Okay.
I've been going for a number of years now. What, 6 years? I can't remember.
Mhm.
But I've found often that I'll immediately put into practice something I learned there, like the same day,
Excellent.
which is
Good deal.
kind of wild. But yeah, I always find it really, really useful, really helpful to understand both what's happening currently, what has happened, and what's expected to happen. So it really is sometimes I have difficulty narrowing down my choices to the available time. So I find it very helpful.
I appreciate that.
I'll add, I went a few years ago and I found it was really helpful to just listen to other plan sponsors, like other jurisdictions and their experience with different benefits providers,
Mhm.
and just to put the city in that context. So
Excellent. I
I'd
appreciate that.
recommend it if you have it.
Oh, no, yeah. Okay, yeah, no, mostly it was, my wife works for City of Pasadena, and that she sometimes kibitzes with me about, conferences that they're recommending. She's like, I don't want to go to that. I know exactly what's in. And then others like, I really want to go to that one. So this sounds like I really want. So in the absence of any further questions, I would move approval of that.
Second.
Thank you. And just for clarity, when we say members, we include members and alternates.
Correct.
Awesome.
Was there-
So yeah, we had a
Tony seconded.
motion and second. So
Okay.
if we can.
Then we'll go ahead and vote in the same order. So Tony, your vote.
Aye.
Tony votes aye. Matt, your vote.
Aye.
Matt votes aye. Petty, your vote.
Aye.
Petty votes aye. Shauna, your vote.
Aye.
Shauna votes aye. Marlene, your vote.
Aye.
Marlene votes aye. Esteban, your vote.
Aye.
Esteban votes aye. And Lisa, your vote.
Aye.
Lisa votes aye. It's unanimous. The motion passes.
Thank you. And also thank you to staff for bringing this earlier than we have in the past. That's super helpful for me so that I don't end up, miles away. Okay, let's see. Moving on to number 5, benefits provider presentation from Delta Dental. Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Megan Gardner from Keenan. I'm going to be doing a brief intro for Delta Dental. I'm joined today by Kristen Warren, who will be presenting the details of legalization. We're actually talking about 2023. It seems like we just talked about it in November for 2022, and then we have some color for last year, so that's nice. Moving into the presentation, just want to start with a little bit of an overview. As you may recall, the dental plans just wrapped up RFP. Their contract started January 1 of this year. We saw some very positive movements in the terms of the rates and the plans that are offered. There are 3 types of plans that are currently offered: a dental HMO, a preventive-only plan, and a dental PPO plan. So we saw some decrease on the HMO and the PPO and the preventive plan across the board, which is all very positive for the city and the members. Decrease in the rates, again, from the prior year, but those will be locked in for several years. The contract is a optional 5-year, 3 with an option to extend for the additional 2 years. Next slide, please. In terms of utilization, 2023 saw a slight increase over 2022 by 1.2%, and we're starting to see that steady increase in utilization coming back from the pandemic and definitely normalizing. The total plan costs were about 97.1% of premium, and we're seeing that normalization on a PEPM basis back to pre-pandemic levels. In 2019, it was $75.64, and now in 2023, we saw $75.37 PEPM. So that's good to see that normalization. As far as plan design goes, the city does have a competitive and typical plan design. You have that lovely diagnostic and preventive waiver, which is great for your employee pocketbooks. All those preventive services don't go towards your annual max. They can take their dollars further in terms of the benefit, which is great. We have about 55.9% of members receiving a premium in 2023, slight decline by 0.1%, so really staying stable there, and the number of members who are utilizing, which is great. And it is higher than Delta's municipal benchmark, which is fantastic. Your employees are doing what we want them to do. We want them to get that preventative done so that we can avoid those high cost and services such as crowns and major services, root canals and the like. So that's excellent. Employee online engagement statistics, Delta has been tracking those. You have about 45% of your members with an active online account. I'd like to see a little higher, but that's still really good. And that is a small increase over the prior year, so definitely tracking in a positive direction. It was interesting that we saw of the use of the online tools. There was no cost estimator requests in 2023, which we're going to kind of dig into a little bit, but in prior years, we did see some cost estimator requests using the tools online on Delta's website. So definitely an interesting statistic there. It's one that we want to explore a little bit more, but I'm going to hand it over to Kristen. If Kristen's available to dive into the actual nitty-gritty of the plan details and utilization.
Thanks, Megan. I appreciate it. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. My name is Kristen Warren. I am your Delta Dental Account Manager. With me today is Michelle Bodie, the Director of National and Special Accounts, and we really appreciate the opportunity to present the dental plan utilization for 2023. Paul, are you putting that on the screen?
Yeah. Just a second.
So really the plan for the next 20 minutes or so is to go through the dental plan performance, including the financials, utilization, and talk about the network. And then we'll walk into the member experience and what Delta's doing to educate, engage, and communicate the members. And then also what we offer the benefits in terms of communications. So next slide is really the key points for 2023 at a high level. But Megan did a really good job of that overview, so I won't spend much time here other than just a general comment that overall the 2020 utilization is very consistent with 2022. The city has always been very stable and consistent in utilization patterns until, of course, COVID. And it looks like we're just in the last 2 years, we've kind of gone back to normal, so much so that I hope next year I won't even have to mention the COVID wording. And hopefully we're all through that. I want to go to the next slide. We'll just dig right into the details. You're looking here at the enrollment on the 3 dental plans that are offered to the employees. There was a 1.6% overall increase in primary enrollees on the dental plan. And then I individually broke out on the left-hand side each of the changes in enrollment by specific plan. The distribution across the dental plans has been consistent year over year, with about 65% of the enrollees choosing the PPO plan, 1.8%, so very small amount enrolled in the preventative plan, and then 32.7% on the HMO plan. The average age of a city's employees. I can't tell. Do you have a question?
No.
No.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm probably hearing a little bit of feedback. So let me down now. All right, my apologies. So the average age of the city employee on the PPO plan is 48 and a half, 48 on the preventative plan, and then slightly lower on the Delta Care USA plan, which is pretty typical on our plans that the HMO plan has a slightly about 5 to 7 year difference in ages. So the next slide will move to the financials. The top graph here is reflecting the incurred per employee per month cost over a 5-year period. There was a 1.2 increase in costs in 2023 compared to 2022. As I mentioned, everything about the city you'll find through here has been pretty stable and consistent from 2022. The PEPM costs, if we compare to 2019 and we take that as the pre-COVID baseline, you'll see that we had the hit for COVID, coming back up in 2021 and getting to where we need to be in 2022 and 2023. So you'll see the city is kind of back to pre-pandemic financials, and we'll see that in the utilization as well on the next couple slides. The bottom graph is breaking out the same information over individual quarters, and I just included this here so that you could just see that the most highly utilized quarter for the city tends to be Q1. And you'll see that in Q1 of 2022, and then the high point in Q1 of 2023 as well. Next slide. So this slide reflects the providers that the City of LA members are utilizing. The city has a very strong, almost 93% of members visiting a contracted provider and experiencing the cost savings and quality guarantees from the network. 67.6% are enjoying the deepest discounts by seeking services from our PPO network. And this is significantly above the benchmark of municipalities of 61.3%. There was a small shift from Premier Dentist to out of network, and the city's benchmarking higher in that category as well. And geography, plan design, communication to enrollees all play kind of a breakdown into this network utilization. We'll talk a little bit more about the network on the next slide, but the bottom box here is showing our savings from our network contracts. For 2023, there was a combined $15.3 million savings off of our provider discounts from submitted fees, with 41.8% in our PPO network a savings of 24.7 in our Premier network, for a total net effective discount of almost 35%. Next slide. So I want to spend a few minutes to talk about the network access and recruitment, because 2022 and really the beginning parts of 2023 were pretty active in regard to network management. We saw more network activity and changes than we had in the past, really as a result of the pandemic and the economy. Our providers had to make business decisions for their practices. So we saw a lot more retirements, selling of practices, practices going insurance independent, not taking insurance at all. And this was, I do want to say this was not unique to Delta or even dental, really. It was kind of an industry-wide trend throughout the country for healthcare. And the good news is we've seen that, I don't know if this is the right word, we've seen the network kind of settle, if you will. And I want the data here is where we kind of ended 2023. Delta continues to have industry-leading access with 77% of providers contracting with Delta. The top left chart is broken down to the top 5 counties that were utilized by the City of LA members. And then it shows the provider universe and then each network percentage of providers that we have in both our Premier and our PPO network. So your members have excellent access and choice to PPO provider. And then the bottom chart is specific to the utilization of your members. So it's by top 5 counties and then a summary by state. There were 5,860 Delta dentists utilized in 2023 by your members. Less than 0.7% actually, voluntary terminated from the network in 2023, and that impacted about 107 of your employees. That's pretty standard numbers and much different than what we saw in 2022 coming off of COVID. And then in terms of recruitment for 2023, Delta added 1,363 providers in California. And the good part here is that 182 of those recruited providers were already treating City of LA members. So moving forward, those employees who were previously out of network will now benefit from that. So overall, the dental networks remain stable, and we're continuing to offer the city employees access to the largest contracted network in California. I want to pause here. I know there had been questions about dental access and recruitment previously. So any questions here before we move into the utilization?
I do have one question, maybe, and perhaps it's naive. This is Matthew Rudnick. I see that you showed the voluntary terminations, and it's a kind of small number. Are there any instances where Delta Dental terminated contracts with dentists, like proactively, or is this just showing terminations that are voluntary by the dentists?
So I showed here the voluntary terminations because that tends to be when those providers go to your members and leave the plan. We have other attrition that I mentioned in terms of deaths and retirements. We also have involuntary terminations, and those would be reasons for, credentialing didn't come through correct. There was a problem with credentialing, or potentially if we saw any kind of activity or non-compliance to the contracts, then we would involuntary terminate.
Understood.
Not a ton of those, but they do happen.
So it's a small number, and overall, very few of our employees were impacted by any changes in dentists that still are engaged with Delta Dental.
That is correct. I mean, honestly, even one employee impacted is some disruption, and I'm sure Paul hears about it, but yeah, it was a very low number in 2023 for your members.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next slide, we're moving into the actual utilization. This is the distribution of services that are being utilized by your members by service type. So the graph on the left is representing the PPO plan, and the graph on the right is the DHMO plan. And then the blue, or kind of blue, the first column is 2022 utilization, and the green is 2023, with gray being the benchmark. So the PPO plan distribution is consistent year over year. You can see there's virtually no change in that distribution, with 73% of services are diagnostic and preventative in nature. 22% are basic, and that's your restorative services and your specialty care like perio, gum treatments, endodontics, and oral surgery. And then 5% is your major services, implants, bridges, and dentures. Compare the city with the benchmark. The city is slightly below benchmark for diagnostic and preventative services and just slightly above for basic services, but very consistent with what the city's been doing year over year. And then on the Delta Care USA plan on the right, there was a shift in the distribution from basic services to the preventative, the diagnostic and preventative category. And comparing that benchmark, or comparing that to the benchmark, the city's members were 3% higher in the preventative category than benchmark. And then we'll take a deeper dive into the preventative services on the next slide. And there is quite a bit of information on this slide, so let me just kind of point out the noteworthy pieces, starting with the cleaning utilization at the top. There were 55.9% of members that had their teeth cleaned in 2023, which is 86.6% of all the utilizers. And this was kind of dead on with your 2022 utilization. The city's cleaning utilization is almost 3% higher than benchmark for other municipalities. Then I always like to take a look at this no utilization box. The city had 35.5% of members that did not see a dentist at all in 2023. You can see that's consistent with 2022. And then I want to point out that the city does have 3.4% more members visiting a dentist than the benchmark, which is at 38.9%. And then with exams, you had 59.3% of members had an exam in 2023, with 92% of utilizers getting at least one exam. So overall, the city members are utilizing preventative care consistent with the previous year utilization, and then in higher numbers than the benchmark. Next slide is the annual maximum report. Shows the percentage of members and utilizers that reached the calendar year maximum in 2023. 4% of all members, which was 6.1% of all utilizers, reached the 2023 maximum, and that was compared to the 6.2% in 2022. So again, very consistent. The city is benchmarking just above our municipality book of business at 5.5%, which you can see highlighted at the bottom right green section of the screen. And then 1,500 continues to be the most common maximum for our municipality clients, followed closely by 2,000. And then the bottom graph, I like to break out in terms of dollar bands. So there's the dollar bands across the bottom, where people were hitting and ending the year in their claims paid. The city of LA had 85.5% of all utilizers, of all members had claims paid under $600. And then you can kind of see the breakout where we had about 1,500 that reached the maximum. Next slide is the orthodontic utilization. There are 5.9% of your dependents that are currently in active orthodontic treatment, that's braces, and the benchmark is 5.7%. So just a titch higher. On the right side in the green is the benchmarking data. So for our municipality clients, about 55% of them cover adult ortho, 44 are covered children only, and 1,500 continues to be the most prevalent maximum for our orthodontic book of business. Next slide is the web engagement that Megan spoke about. 45% of all members have an active account, which is up 1% from last year. I'm gonna say that Megan said she'd like to see that a little higher, and I'm gonna say for dental, that's pretty high for a dental utilization for a client that's been with Delta for a long time. And I say that because what we find is that our Delta dentists tend to handle most of the issues for members. So they check the benefits. We process claims quickly. So there's not really a reason for the member to go to the website. And when I say that, that's behind the sign-in, because things like Find a Provider and some of our tools are available on the front end. So we also want to see it higher, but I did want to just state that 45% is benchmarking quite high for a dental plan. 66.8% of enrollees with an account have signed up to receive electronic EOBs. And we had 6,151 unique website visitors log into their account in 2023. And that's about 34% more visitors than last year. And I did note that the top pages seem to be obtaining documents, ID cards, or viewing claims. And then I guess the disappointing fact on the page is that there were no cost estimator requests. City of LA, I think last year had about 200 people going to our cost estimator tool. So we did not see that this year. And I know Paul had done a really good job of putting that into the communication. So I think I honestly, I don't have a reason for why people aren't going there, because it is such a fantastic tool if you're looking to do costs. Our providers can do a predetermination of services for their members for costs. And so we do see those come through quite a bit. And it may be that that's being handled on that side for members who have questions. Okay, before we move on to member communications, I'll stop here and open it up for questions.
That seems odd that there was not one cost estimator request, and curious if it's like a technology issue or some other, just to go from 200 to 0 seems peculiar. It sounds like you've looked into it and you spoke to this, like maybe more folks are just calling and asking questions, but to the extent you guys find out any more, a reason for that, or be interesting to hear a report back.
Yeah, let me share with you that I saw that and I thought it was a mistake. I ran it myself 3 times, and then I went and talked to our IT because I couldn't believe it. So then, of course, I pulled other clients to make sure that it wasn't some kind of system issue. And no, it was actually none. And so I do think that was a little bit unusual. I mean, I don't tend to see that number utilized as much as I would like to see it utilized, but 0 was a little bit surprising.
Do the providers have access to the same estimator or a similar tool? Because I could see somebody goes to the dentist, gets the cleaning, gets their x-rays, and then the dentist says, well, you really need to do A, B, and C, and according to your insurance, it's going to cost blah, blah, blah. And then you wouldn't have any reason to go yourself on the website.
You know, you make the best point that I should have pointed out, and that is that we have provider tools at our dental offices, both for our contracted providers, but also out-of-net providers. It allows them to put in basically those services and kind of submit the claim real time. And it does process through our system and tell them exactly what's going to be paid. Should the claim be approved, exactly what it would pay out at. So we are seeing an increase in providers using our provider tools and have gotten some great feedback on that. So you raise a great point. Thank you.
Can I just ask a question on a different topic? Going to the slide that's diagnostic and preventative services.
Mm-hmm.
This is just my not knowing. For the utilization, there's a 0 with an asterisk and then a 1. What's the 0 with an asterisk?
Yeah, let's take the cleanings box, for example. So this is running a report of everybody who had cleanings and then in the number. So the no utilization is people who've had no dental utilization at all. But the 0 is people who've had utilization, but not a cleaning. So there were 8% of your people who had dental services that weren't a cleaning. And then same with the exams. You had 5.1% of your people who had some kind of service that wasn't an exam.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Thank you. I should have gone over that. Any other questions on the utilization? Okay, so then we'll go to the next slide, which is our digital campaigns. think in a previous meeting, a question was asked about how we communicate with the city's employees, and we take a very deliberate and thoughtful approach in communicating with the members. And today we have 2 digital campaigns for outreach. The first is our welcome campaign, which is geared to welcome new members to the plan as soon as they become effective, introduces them to the Find a Dentist tool, how to get an ID card, and then we encourage them to register on our member portal. It is a 2 email campaign. If no action is taken to register on that first email, we'll send a second one to try and get people to go into the website. And then the second is a more targeted mailing to members who have not been to the dentist at all for a period of time. It's actually about 7 months. And we send an email kind of encouraging them to schedule an appointment for their cleaning and sharing the importance of a preventative care. These are email campaigns. And so I'm going to tell you that the city currently sends emails for only about 10% of members. So we have the 10% of members that we would be sending to, and then any email addresses that we have because members have registered, those would be our audience that we can send digital campaigns for. So I'm hoping over time we may have some ability to work with the city to obtain maybe city emails for members so that we can reach out to more of your membership. The next slide, so digital campaigns are sort of the direct outreach to our employees. We also offer other support to members, and on the next slide, we're going to show our video resources that can be shared with employees that are also posted on our website that help educate them on our networks, on our online tools, including the cost estimator. You'll see that's one. And we can also provide links. I think we may have provided links already to the city to post. And one of my favorite things that we do is our live wellness webinars. These are hosted by our in-house dentist every month. This year, we have 2 topics that are rotating throughout the year. One is our oral health and wellness, kind of the whole truth about a healthy smile. And then the second one is oral health and aging, kind of how our dentistry needs change as we age. And I'm not sure how this is set up because I'm not on site, unfortunately, if you're able to access the QR code. But when you do, there's information about the webinars with an easy button to click to register for those meetings. So want to work with Paul to see if the city can post the QR code, and we can provide a ready-made email that can be sent to city employees. Just can't say enough about the presentations. They've been very well received by our members with lots of positive feedback. Next slide. New this year for open enrollment and throughout the year, actually, Delta has placed all of the city's dental materials in one location and made it available in the QR code that you see here. When you click on the QR code, this information on the right-hand side populates. So it makes it really easy for members to find their benefit summary options, member resources, how to navigate the website, our value-added perks. And then you can't see it here because I only had so much real estate on the slide, but below this cost estimator video is a link directly to our secured customer service site so that members can ask questions securely through our site. This microsite link can be posted on the intranet for employees to access. And then, of course, Delta will bring flyers with the QR code to any of the open enrollment meetings that may occur for the 2024 open enrollment. Any questions here?
Can I follow Paul about why don't they have access to our emails?
So for us to be able to pass an employee email to a vendor, we need authorization from the employee. So when we had the TELUS system, when it was first, as Mono Chappelle launched, we did an opt-out that allowed employees to be able to say that they would be able to use their whatever email they gave to us for all the communications available that were through the things they enrolled into. That didn't work out. So we had to turn it off and we haven't turned it back on. We're still working with TELUS and trying to get that fixed. But that is the reason why there's so few emails that are being passed over to the vendors. And they're not passed to all vendors. They're actually just passed to a couple. And it is on the list for us to work with TELUS as part of the renewal that we have for them for that the committee had agreed to. The additional 5 years of the contract extension for us to work with that function and have the opt-out feature work as soon as possible.
So those emails that we get from with the personnel banner that have the little pretty little boxes for the different benefits, that comes from your department,
Correct.
right? And that would be a place for this information to come through if they couldn't directly.
Correct.
Reach.
And that still does, because we're sending that citywide to anybody, to all city emails, but that still doesn't reach the whole population because not every city employee, unfortunately, gets a city email. We thought that was going to change with the HRT project coming on, and it's not. So we still have that hole to solve or to address, I guess.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next slide then, I kind of talked about the tools that are for members, and then the next 2 slides are really, and the last 2 are really geared for the benefits team. And every month I send a monthly wellness dental education topic to the city on whatever the topic of the month for Delta is. This is a sample on the left-hand side. It's, I guess, a little bit small, but on the top, I just give a little note, and then it talks about, hey, like in this case, it was reduced stress for your mood and health. And when you click on the link, the right side box appears, and there are all of these screens are hyperlinks to articles or videos or recipes about that health topic. Send it out every year. It is ready to be sent out to city employees should the city be interested. But I will say more often than not, our clients are using this just as taking the materials and putting them in newsletters throughout the year or the quarter or what have you. So it's just a service that we provide, pulling out information that you may use, you may not for a particular month, but it's out there. And then the next slide kind of shows our wellness calendar for 2024. And I really just put this out here so that you can see the variety of topics and resources available that affect dental health. We have, each of these has a link to kind of the same thing you saw on the last slide, links to flyers, videos, and all with the intent to educate employees. The thing that I see the most often is there's a lot of overlap. So instead of sending something for dental, maybe a topic, say diabetes, or I think we have the stress one up, affects medical conditions as well. So it's nice to be able to do a coordinated effort. And that's where, as your account manager, I can work with the city in the best way to make any of these resources possible for you all. And that is it. I will open it up for questions.
I don't have a question, but I'd like to receive some of these. Like, I get some from Kaiser like regularly that I pick and choose to attach to our member communication newsletters that we get out monthly. So if I could throw in some down to dental items, that'd be great. Wasn't aware of this.
So are you asking to receive as a member? Or are you asking to receive the content to be on my distribution list to send to you? Because I can absolutely do that. You can follow up with your email address.
The latter, if that's possible, yes.
Sure. Paul, do you want to send me the email address?
Yeah.
And I will do that. Okay, perfect.
We might do.
Sure.
That's a good idea. Thanks.
We really appreciate your time and appreciate your business. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Great presentation. Thanks. Moving on to item number 6, oral presentation from the city attorney.
Morning. This on. Good morning, Charles Hong, Deputy City Attorney. Today, I'm going to give you a brief background on the Brown Act. I know we're all familiar with it in general, but this is simply a refresher to have certain things in mind as what the Brown Act is meant to do and what its purpose is. For part of my presentation, I'll give a brief history of what the Brown Act was meant to do and then go into certain specifics as to how that's applied to this committee and to just other committees as a whole. So as we all know, the Brown Act was adopted in the 1953 in order to ensure public access to meetings being held by governmental bodies. And it was meant to ensure that decisions are made in a transparent and an open manner with open debate and open discussion and to give the public an opportunity to comment on those discussions as well. The Brown Act can be found in the Government Code beginning section 54950 and in the California Code of Regulations beginning with section 15,000. Again, as the Brown Act is meant to do, is to remind everyone that the state of California believes in transparency, believes in openness, and it believes in public access to all governmental decisions that are being made. And so in that manner, the Brown Act focuses on what's considered a public meeting. And that term is a holistic term. And there's no formalities at what considered a meeting is, but generally a meeting is where you have a congregation of a majority of the governing body deliberating and discussing, I would say, commenting or influencing or making decisions on matters that are within the jurisdiction of the governing body itself. Now, what is considered a governing body? As we all know, the city council for the city of LA is considered a governing body, but also governing bodies are subsidiary bodies created by council. For example, this committee would be a subsidiary body of the council and subject to the Brown Act. Now, not all governing bodies are subject to the Brown Act. Certain subcommittees are not subject to the Brown Act unless they're standing subcommittees. So if you form ad hoc subcommittees or study groups, they would not be subject to the Brown Act. So that's something to keep in mind when this committee establishes an ad hoc committee or a standing committee, then provisions of the Brown Act may apply to that body. So the next question is what, again, going back to what is a meeting? Again, it's a holistic term. There's no formalities involved. And again, it's where majority of the members deliberate on matters within the jurisdiction of the body in which they are a member of. So for the JLMBC, obviously a meeting would be majority of the members. Now it's a unique situation here because this body is comprised of management and labor, you have separate quorum requirements for both. So the Brown Act doesn't go into that kind of detail, but where arguably it would be of a majority of members of within the labor organization or a majority member of within the management organization separately meeting to discuss items within the jurisdiction of this committee. That would be considered a meeting. Now, meetings can take form, again, in various situations. It could be through telephone. It can be through email. It could even be through social media or social media platforms and so that's something to keep mind of. Meetings can also occur through a series of communications where you have member A communicating with member B, and then member B in turn communicating with member C, and so on and so on. That's what we call a serial meeting. Another type of meeting are what we call hub and spoke, where you have member A communicating with member B, then in turn member A communicating with member C, and then so on and so forth. So you have a centralized member communicating with various other members in order to discuss matters within the jurisdiction of the committee. That would also be a meeting. And so that's something to also be mindful of when discussing matters by this committee. What is not a meeting? For example, in the presentation, there is a conference that the members may attend that would technically not be a meeting unless, again, you're actually congregating to meet on matters of this committee, right? So if you're meeting at a meeting, if attendees are at a meeting where there's engaged in a matter outside of just, I would say, socially or just in training, that would not be considered a meeting. I can pause here to answer any questions or provide clarity on anything I've said.
I have a question, just generally, excuse me. Was there like what was the impetus for the presentation today? Was there a change in the law that requires doing these periodically or?
No. It was more just a refresher. I think the last time we did a Brown Act presentation for this body has been some time. I don't believe I've actually ever did a Brown Act refresher for this committee. And so we thought maybe it would be just a good idea just to remind everyone what the Brown Act is. I mean, with coming out of COVID, there were changes with AB 2449 in terms of how meetings can be held remotely and so forth. So this is kind of rounding out the edges just to give everybody just a quick refresher. And I know this committee changes memberships from time to time. So not everyone has had a briefing on the Brown Act or had a working familiarity with the Brown Act, but maybe a refresher would be necessary. So,
Thank you.
Okay. So I'm not going to go into AB 2449. I just mentioned that dealing with remote meetings and so forth. If there's any questions to that nature, you can obviously address them to Paul, and Paul will obviously come to me for clarification. So if there's no other questions, I can stop here and refer back to Paul for the agenda. Oh, I'm sorry, the chair. Back to the agenda.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are there any questions or comments?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to committee report 2414, the HRP project update.
Okay, so this is our regular update that we're going to be bringing every meeting through the launch of the payroll system. When we last met, we said that there had been no status, and the work that staff needed to do to be able to create the files and make sure that we started. But there had been, because there was a delay in us moving from a test tenant. But there was hope at that time at the meeting that we would that we had a file and we could start testing. Since that meeting, nothing's happened. The file that they produced for us it was flawed. It needed to be fixed, and it did take weeks for them to be able to actually take action on it. Testing was supposed to stop last week at the end of February. For what we're doing for this integration concept of passing files back and forth to the system, I do have agreement from Workday as well as KPMG and those involved that we're talking with that we can continue our work on testing. Their discussion with me is that the system itself and it transferring from being, and let me go down the timeline to give you a better idea of what I'm trying to talk about. In this effort that's happening, this transition build from March to June, is essentially siloed over to them creating the system for go live, and our work that we need of pulling data from the system isn't going to affect that build. That's the argument that they're making to me, so that we can continue our testing of pulling data from the system that they're starting to build and creating this file interface. So we should still have a couple months left to be able to do our testing. But our testing plan is going to take a couple months, and that's just the best case scenario, that we can actually have things move smoothly and not have any more delays. So there's a huge concern that we're going to be able to actually still pull this off before June and not have any more setbacks, since we've had so many setbacks so far. So we are meeting with ITA, with Ted Ross and his staff next week to express our concerns. And try to make sure that we have enough support from his department to continue this work and actually make it happen within the time period that we have left. So I hope when we meet again in April for this meeting that I have a positive update at that point, but it is very stressful. It does impact staff a lot, myself and everybody else on my team. Because this is a lot of work that we have to combine into a very short period of time, along with the other work that we have to do at the same period of time, not to mention our regular jobs. So it's, and then the deadline is the deadline. So that's everything that I can say at this moment. Yes.
It sounds like if the parallel testing doesn't start very, very soon in earnest, it's just, the date's going to have to be pushed back to June 16th date, because I mean, I know it says 2 months, but you guys sort of put it in about 2.5 months. So is that about accurate if you can't resolve this issue fairly soon?
I would say more so we will work with whatever the result is.
Right.
And so what I can guarantee the result is whoever I have in coverage at the time that we transfer is who I have in coverage, right? Like that data is fine leading up to go launch. It's the data afterwards. So that's where we're going to have to identify a solution on the fly, essentially, to be able to solve whatever we can't solve if I don't have reliable data passing between the two systems at that point. I expect everything's going to fall apart. Just quite honestly, like we're going to prepare for the worst and expect for the absolute worst to happen in June, and then try to work it through that way. We said before in a committee, and I'm going to say again repeatedly, I think the best thing we can do is just make sure our members are aware and keep them on top of things and making sure that they can tell us when something doesn't work and when something's broken. We really need them to be our eyes and ears as much as I'm sure they're also frustrated and scared at the same time. We just need to make that communication plan, which we have not developed yet, but we're working on.
The other question in terms of the payroll parts of this thing. Because we're almost done. I don't know if you guys are. I think you guys might be done, but all these salary notes present a real issue. Is everything working out okay with that? 'Cause that's one of my biggest concerns. That I mean, in prior places where I've worked at, we basically had general salary and maybe a bilingual and a night, but in my small 800 member unit, we have A through AAA, and I think if we're successful at a few things, we might go into a few more letters on the triple side. So, it's kind of crazy. So, how is that working out?
So I can't speak to a lot of what departments are doing on payroll HR. I can only see what I see.
Right.
We do get salary passed on our file. I do have exposure to seeing a little bit of how it works in the Workday system. I can say there's a lot of unanswered questions from what I hear from departments and others. I can tell you already from what we've seen as far as data is passing, the salary needs a lot of work for us to be able to agree that it's correct on the data that we're seeing. Right now, it's not. And in talking, I think the bigger concept or the bigger issue for the most part, at least for what we see, is Pacer did things very, very clearly. This is how this worked. This is how this was supposed to be set.
Right.
And for some reason, that didn't get passed on directly to Workday when they program things and when they set it up. And now they have to look back and see why they set something up that way and try to make a decision on which values are the ones that actually are supposed to pass to us, if that's making sense. So it's still an unsolved question.
For our next meeting, would you mind making some inquiries with departments in this so we kind of have an idea of what they may be thinking in terms of, because I will say we're going to do our best. One, it's great that we're here because we have an idea. We're going to do our best to try to prepare our members as the rollout happens. But salary and when you get paid and that kind of stuff is kind of a silly example, but it took us longer to complete deferred negotiations. And so our boot allowance for MOU 12 for our group, we're not quite up to there because we're still finishing that up with council. But everyone else got their check in February. And so my member's check is $100 less than the others because I'm waiting to catch up to the extra boot allowance we got, right? And so because my salary notes haven't been processed from deferred, haven't been processed through council yet. They're almost there. They just finished pause last month or February 20th. So, but the reason why I mentioned this is that one little glitch, it's $100 difference, and we get a lot of calls and a lot of questions. I mean, they're just like, hey, what is up with my thing? And so that's just like one tiny little thing. And so we're going to try to do our best to let our members know, this is when it's anticipated to roll out. Let us know this or that. But it's a very sensitive thing. And I don't blame them, right? So if when we come back in April, if you could check with departments, see what they're anticipating.
Can I just make a comment? I was just going to suggest, I think if it's related to benefits issues, then Paul, it makes sense for their group to respond to that. But it seems to me like other bonuses and the implementation of that through Workday might be a request of like CAO, Employee Relations Division, or ITA.
I totally understand, but this appears to be the committee that's overseeing the implementation of this.
It's not.
No.
Oh, okay. Well,
It's
then I'm wrong.
citywide.
Oh, no.
This is just benefit version.
Okay, well, then you know what? Sorry, Paul.
Okay, that's okay. Well,
I'll ask another Paul.
There you
Okay.
go.
Yeah, the other Paul.
That's right.
Yeah, that Paul's not
Yeah.
here today.
Okay,
but,
no, that's good. Yeah, he usually sits here. That's
Yeah.
why I put the chair. Yeah.
Can we strike that?
No, I got you. Thank you. I appreciate it. No, thank you.
But what I was going to say, we are planning to have somebody come and give a presentation on Workday at the April
Oh, great.
Nice.
So what we've, there was a request for a demo of the system from the employee view is what we're asking for. We're asking for somebody, and this is going to be someone from their training
Thank you for
team
that.
that they set up.
We-
I believe it's someone from Accenture, the vendor or the consultant. But we still haven't worked out who's actually going to do it. But it's going to be somebody coming here to give a demo. We're asking them to show the actual employee view, what the employees are going to experience when phase 2 goes live. I'm also asking them to go through the onboarding situations that we've been having with benefits, so you can see what the employee sees when they go through that. That's the objective. That's the idea, to have it happen at our next meeting in April, one way or another. So you might be able to direct some other questions if you had them to that person, since they are going to
Got
get
it.
it.
No, I appreciate it.
Paul,
Thank
can
you.
I just make a suggestion too? Because
Sure.
I think the city family as a whole is very, I think, has its own concerns about the implementation and the deadline coming up, and all departments being ready for that. And bottom line, I think, obviously, payroll is so important. It's about employees receiving their paycheck and getting that right. And we know there's going to be hiccups when implementation happens in terms of just employees entering time within a new system, and there's always transition issues. But I think that the health benefits overlap or connection is glossed over. Like, it's not something maybe department HR divisions are thinking about. So I think it's vital, because it seems to me there's a two-way flow. Like, you all need to know, like the system, Workday needs to understand the benefits elections so that paychecks, their appropriate deductions can be made and all of that. And then you need data from the payroll system itself as well. So it's two-way. I do think if you don't see progress, and this is an emerging concern that's not being addressed, please do recommend to this body if there's anything we can do in terms of sending a letter on behalf of JLMBC to the personnel department or others on the topic, because I think the focus is really like just the baseline paycheck. But if this prevents the adequate provision of health benefits as well, I think we're equally concerned with it. So anything we can do to support, I'm sure we'll hear next meeting, but please bring it back to our attention.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Okay.
And also, they're having some type of general meeting with mostly GMs and HGMs concerning the system. And maybe during that meeting, we can bring that up to the powers that be to deal with that. Another area I think you need to probably be working with or working on, most of the calls are going to come to the personnel groups. Because when we get a call, we just refer to personnel.
Right.
This is
why they got
and somehow working with them so they have the information, whatever, because you really want your workforce to have the benefits and the pay, because if you start having challenges with that, it evolves to other issues. And because technical wise or virtual wise or computer wise, it looks easy. But when you're dealing with the frontline individuals, they're calling you whatever, with the unions or whatever, because if they can't get personnel, the next person who calls a union rep.
Right.
And it's just that we have to work together because we're in the same boat in this thing. And what we're trying to do is help the members or our employees.
And also, much of the conversation has been about kind of baseline topics, but we have some really vulnerable populations where salary or lack of salary triggers benefits and lack of benefits. So if we have people out on maternity leaves or are at the point where they're not receiving pay, but they're on FMLA, we have some vulnerable populations that we have to also keep an eye on during that transition.
And you also have classifications when it comes to compensation. They're on the edge. And if you're short on money, it could equal to eviction. So that's why it's very, very important that we get this right.
It's scary.
That's the nature of payroll.
And yes.
Payroll's always scary.
Paul, are you still having a situation where new employees are not they're not able to enter the information that they need to enter, or they skip the step? This was something that we saw in our department where they were skipping a step in their data entry when they're coming on board, and so they're not able to get their benefits on time. Do we still have people in that caught in that?
It is still, so nothing has really changed in the structure of the system, unfortunately. The only thing that's changed is we've created a document to try to tell supervisors and HR to tell their employees to do the step. And so that does still happen. We do still see employees who, through the onboarding process, didn't complete that step. They didn't realize that it wasn't completed. And then they don't get their benefits because we don't have the data to be able to give them the offer. And it goes pay periods, it goes months, and until they realize that they don't have something.
Because I think that's so compelling as an argument of why, something they have to, because we have people, because if you've got someone new to the city, they don't know what they don't know. So they don't find out until it's too late that they don't have the benefits that they think they have. And then they have to wait even longer. It's, so I was hoping that number at least had minimized of how many people we have in that space.
We've talked so many ways, and we being me and Workday people and programmers and everybody, on how can we try to make it do something different, and then there's no solution. So it's going to be an ongoing problem, at least until further notice. We're going to show it, at least that's the intent, is to show it in the demo when we have the person show the system at the April meeting.
Okay, cool.
So you can see what it looks like. There is a small change that we did discover that we're trying to implement, but it's a voluntary option. It doesn't actually change the flow of how this onboarding concept works, and doesn't change where employees potentially will have this problem.
Lots of concerns. Thank you. All right, so let's move on to Committee Report 2415, Projects and Activities.
Good morning, JLMBC members. This is Chung Tran with Employee Benefits Member Services, and I will be going over some of the highlights from the Projects and Activities report. First, on page 1, we have an Anthem UC Health Network Agreement update. First thing first is some follow-ups from the prior meeting. Anthem has since provided some statistics regarding the UC Health system utilization by members, and has also provided a copy of the continuity of care request form detailing some of the certain conditions where continuity of care would be, the certain conditions where continuity of care would be eligible for that. For the second update, we have good news. Anthem has also advised the city that they and UC Health have since agreed in principle on a new contract, and that the current agreement has been extended from March 1st through April 1st to allow both parties time to finalize the new agreement. A second letter will also be sent to impacted members to advise them of this change, and that will include instructions on how members can re-enroll with UC Health or with another medical group if they so choose to. Moving on over to page 2, we have an update on the Support Plus and Family Assistance Program presentation from last month. For this update, there was a question about the adult elder care work-life services decline following the 2021 benefit year. Optum has since provided an explanation regarding the drop in elder care usage. And then if we move over to the middle of page 3, we have an update on the RFPs. So on February 15th, the Health and Dependent Care RFP was released on RAMP. The pre-proposal conference is set for later this afternoon. Based upon the questions we've received so far, we expect to have a pretty good turnout for this pre-proposal conference. We received questions from about 4 or 5 different entities so far. The proposals are due on March 21st. For the second RFP, the Life, Disability, and ADD RFP, that was released on January 31st. The pre-proposal conference was held on February 22nd. 13 different firms attended that proposal conference, and the proposals are due on March 12th. And now with both RFPs due in March and due to the strong attendance for the latter RFP, staff is cautiously optimistic that multiple competitive proposals will be received for the life insurance RFP. And given the intricate coverage and concept involved, and coverage concept and options involved for that RFP, we are anticipating that we may need an additional special meeting in May to allow sufficient time for us to go to thoroughly present the recommendations for both RFPs. And lastly, we are happy to report that the vacant senior benefits analyst position overseeing the wellness program has been filled. Andrew Torres has accepted the job offer and is coming over from the Personnel Department Office of Workplace Equity. And that concludes this report. I'm happy to answer any questions and also to take any items for future JLMBC meetings.
I have a couple things. Do you mean cautiously optimistic or cautiously terrified? 13 is like, that's a lot. That's a lot of work. I'm a little bit scared for you guys if even half of those came through, that would be a significant amount of work. But the potential for it to be a dozen or more is frightening. It's a lot. It's a lot of work for you guys, especially considering that the issues with HRP that you're already dealing with, and that's a lot of plates to spin. So just Godspeed, little soldier. I hope you can.
Yeah, thank you.
manage that.
That's been a topic of concern for us. I mean, we are happy that there's been a high level of interest from potential proposers, but at the same time, we are on a fairly strict timetable. We would need upon the deadline to submit, we would need to start reviewing and evaluating all of the proposals and then coming up with a recommendation and then preparing the presentation, in time for the May meeting. So that's part of why we, we're raising the possibility that we may need we may need a special meeting in May just to get everything in.
Yeah.
Not only for the health, like an AD&D RFP, but we also have the health independent care RFP as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure I even knew that there were 13 different firms that provided that service, frankly.
Usually if they, 13 come to the pre-bid or whatever, how many usually submit a bid?
Well, I can answer. It really depends. What we are not seeing right now, we're not seeing many of those proposers submit a decline at this point, since proposals are due next week. So maybe like 50%, it really depends.
Okay.
We did see, so we had the pre-proposal conference, and then we had a period for additional questions to come in, and we received a lot of questions from those proposers that were still participating. So we're seeing interest, which is a great sign, as well as extremely scary.
Yeah.
Scary in a good way.
Yeah, because if you have too few, I mean, you got increases in price, so you have no competition.
Yeah, possibly. So in this committee, we'll remember you guys asked a lot of questions and a lot of revisions and options to this concept. And so there's a lot to go over with those options as well.
My other question was on, I don't know if this is going to turn into a question or a comment, but on the Optum follow-up. So it wasn't really that it decreased, it's that there was previously a spike in 2021, basically. So I think, I guess this is a comment really for Optum. I don't know if they're on the line or if you want to take this back to them, but I think if that had been framed a bit differently, like if there had been, because when you look at that, since it's 21, 22, 23, you're just assuming that 21 represents the past. It just kind of carries, right? And so then it looks like a big drop. But I think if we had either seen it framed a little bit differently, it would have been clear that it was a spike. But also, I think that having such a simple answer, oh, that was just a spike that year, it concerns me that they didn't know that when we asked it during the meeting. I mean, when I look at this, it's looking at that little piece of the chart, it's very clearly like, whoa, this is an anomaly. What's this about? And something that we would ask about. So either framing it differently or being more prepared, or my comment stopped. I guess it turned into a comment. I wasn't sure where it was going to go. All right. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, cool. Awesome. Thank you, guys. So do we have any requests for future agenda items either? Okay.
Had we at one point considered having 2 meetings in April, or was May the first month you thought that we would possibly?
May was the first one. So our special meeting will be determined for sure when we meet it at April, that we can have quorum for that date as provided. But it would be exclusively for RFP discussions and medical renewal.
And you guys are fully, congratulations on being fully staffed. I skipped right over that part. Sorry. Congratulations on being fully staffed. That's incredible.
And just under the wire too.
Yeah. Thank God. All right. So we're adjourned 10:15. Good job. Next meeting, April 4th and May 2nd and May 16th, I guess then.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.